Sushmita and I would like to welcome you to the gathering this evening, honoring the in-between places, a fertile, gestational, and often difficult space. I'm going to start with a John O'Donohue poem called For the Interim Time, from his book, To Bless the Space Between Us. When near the end of day, life has drained out of light, and it is too soon for the mind of night to have darkened things. No place looks like itself. Loss of outline makes everything look strangely in between, unsure of what has been or what might come. In this wan light, even trees seem groundless. In a while, it will be night, but nothing here seems to believe the relief of dark. You are in this time of the interim where everything seems withheld. You are in the time of this interim where everything seems withheld. The path you took to get here has washed out. The way forward is still concealed from you. The old is not old enough to have died away. The new is still too young to be born. You cannot lay claim to anything. In this place of dusk, your eyes are blurred and there is no mirror. Everyone else has lost sight of your heart, and you can see nowhere to put your trust. You know you have to make your own way through. As far as you can, hold your confidence. Do not allow your confusion to squander this call, which is loosening your roots in false ground, that you might come free from all you have outgrown. What is being transfigured here is your mind, and it is difficult and slow to become new. The more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will become for your arrival in the new dawn.
So welcome again, everybody. I want to share just very briefly about how I came to this theme of the in-between places. Because we've been doing these gatherings since the pandemic began, and I chose a date that turned out wasn't available. So I was given this date, and I started to think about, okay, so what's special about February the 18th? So it's not an equinox, it's not a solstice, it's not even Valentine's Day. And I was like, damn, this day is useless. It is nothing. And then I said, oh, that's what we're going to focus on. The nothing days, the in-between days, the days that are not special. Because I think we live in a culture where there's such an emphasis on destination and arrival and reaching goals, that to have a day that's not special seems hard to be with. So I was like, okay, that's going to be our theme. So then as we sit with this idea of what is this in-between place, what is in between? And I try to think about who is the archetype of this in-between place. And I think of the traveler, or the pilgrim. Or Bill Plotkin actually has a really beautiful word for this archetype, which I love, which is the wanderer. This is this person who's just wandering from one place to another, and sort of in this place that feels ordinary, that feels mundane, that's it's not, you haven't arrived at the cathedral, you haven't finished your Camino de Santiago, you're on the way. And what do we do? And then if we think about being this traveler, this wanderer, then very quickly we think about who is on the road with us, who is our patron god, if you will. And the patron god of the roadway is often the trickster. And the trickster shows up in many forms, in many cultures. And today I want to take maybe a minute to talk about one of these trickster gods, which is Hermes. So Hermes is the Greek god who is the patron god of the travelers. And he is a true trickster because he's also the patron god of thieves. And so he is everything. He is the god of musicians because he's the inventor of the lyre. He is an orator, a speaker. He brings messages from one god to another god, from humans to gods, from gods to humans. And the reason why he's able to do this is because he's amoral. As a trick, one of the qualities of the trickster is that the trickster is never good or bad, light or dark. It is always both. And for that reason, Hermes is the only god who is allowed to travel all the way from Mount Olympus, where the gods live, to Hades, which is the underworld. No other god or mortal can do this. So that's an interesting image. But a trickster also needs to be kind of handled with care because a trickster is unpredictable. The trickster can be there to help, and the trickster can really mess up things too. So what are kind of the qualities that the traveler will need to have in order to really make the most of this time in between on the road when they haven't arrived anywhere? Or in other ways, we can think about like, what is the medicine of the trickster? And people can come up with many ideas. In fact, one of the versions of Hermes is Hermes Trismegistus, who is the carrier of the caduceus, which is the image of healing, the two snakes intertwined. And he is also the father of the Hermetic traditions. But leaving that aside, I think one of the medicines of this in-between place is paying very close, very specific attention to things. Because even when something doesn't look interesting, doesn't look special, if we really, really pay attention, if we go really close, then we start to see that it becomes ensouled, it kind of becomes exalted. And I'll stop, and before that, I'll give just one image, in fact, a few lines from Mary Oliver, who I consider to be like the priestess of precision. She's just amazing. And these are a few lines that you most likely have read before. It's from her poem, The Summer's Day, and it's this image of the grasshopper. So this is what she has to say. Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. This could be our medicine for the in-between place, this level of precision. And maybe Darby, you want to say a few words before we move on?
When I've been thinking about the in-between space, I've been envisioning it as a place of where we're unmoored. We've been set loose, kind of like John O'Donohue was saying in his poem. We've been set loose from where we were, and we haven't arrived yet where we're going. And so we're on a journey where we're being asked to hold more of life than we've ever held before. And the line that jumped out at me from his poem is, what does it mean to endure faithfully in this space? What does it mean to endure faithfully in this space when we're being asked to hold more, face more reality than we've ever faced before? And I think Mary Oliver's poem is a great answer to that question. That really the best we can do is take a deep breath and be in our senses and focus on this moment, the here and now, this moment right here and now. So that's what I will offer.
Thank you, Darby. So the next piece is we are going to play a video about 5 minutes long. And during that time, you're invited to either write or just reflect, watch the video and reflect. And there's a prompt, and the prompt is, when I find myself in an in-between place, and then just take it from there. And just as a setup, I have another short piece from Mary Oliver again, who tells us what to do. And she can tell it much better than I can. So I'll just use her words. This is what she has to say about what we do. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot, or a few small stones. Just pay attention. Just pay attention, then patch a few words together. Don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but a doorway into thanks, and a silence in which another voice may speak. So that's our invitation for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll share where we land with this.
So we want to invite you all now to a time of sharing. And just a reminder that this gathering is being recorded, so it is not a confidential space in that regard. And a reminder also that we each share out of our own experience. So while it's okay to maybe piggyback on what somebody else has said, make sure that we all are just talking about ourselves. And as Parker Palmer likes to say, this is not about fixing ourselves or fixing anybody else. This is a time of listening, both to ourselves and to others as we share from our hearts and from our experience. So with that said, we'll open it up now for sharing anything about what you've experienced so far here, or using the prompt. What are the in-between spaces in your life? What have they been like? If you're in one now, you might want to share about what it's like for you now. Anything that the concept of in-between space, what that brings up in you, images, thoughts, emotions, body sensations. And we'll just open up now. And again, you can just unmute yourself to share. We don't need to raise our hands.
I can share. This is Susie. And I wrote it down, so I'm going to look at my notes, excuse me. So when I find myself in this in-between place, and I certainly hope this is an in-between place, I become creative, I increase self-care, I lose weight, I grow my business, I worry, I become fearful, I grow, I explore, I unite, I connect, I deepen my spiritual practices.
Thank you. Thank you, Susie.
This is Betty. I'm definitely in an in-between space. Literally, I sold my home back in August, a beautiful log home that I miss. But I'm building my dream retirement home on a lake in the Finger Lakes in New York, and I'm in my second temporary housing. Right now, I'm in Tully, New York. The house isn't going to be ready by the time I have to leave here. So through Airbnb, I found this hopefully nice guy called Chip, who's willing to take me on a week-by-week basis in Savannah, New York. So in an in-between place where I'm at, I think part of what I really need to that is encouraging me to have is certainly trust. Because I really have to trust that the environments I'm in, the very temporary environments, are going to be friendly, and also it's a time where I don't, my belongings are all over. I have a few things here. I have my two cats who are a joy. So it's also a time to realize what is really important, and to think about what I value. So I think those are two main things. The video you showed, I in a previous life, feels many years ago, it was about 15 years ago. I was actually in the foothills of the Himalayas, and I and my now ex-husband went up a path to one of those temples, sitting in the Himalayas. And the Himalayas are amazing, and their vastness, and certainly gives you a feel for in-betweenness. And one image that has stayed with me all these years is we were huffing and puffing up this fairly steep path, and these women passed us, and they were carrying things that they were bringing there to the temple on their heads, and I was just in awe. and one of the women turned and looked at me, and we just kind of had this moment of connection. So it was kind of an in-between thing. We turned back fairly soon after that in exhaustion. So that has definitely stayed with me. And so those images brought back a lot of memories. Thanks.
Thank you, Betty. And just 1 second and then you can go. Just one thing that I wanted to say is, as you're sharing, as you're thinking, reflecting, hearing other people, maybe start, I have a teacher who uses this phrase, harvesting the pearls. Maybe start harvesting the pearls from what you just said, like 2, 3, 4 words. And we'll try to have that as a final share from everybody. Go ahead.
When I find myself in an in-between place, I carve out time. Sometime I carve out my time outside of time. I notice my belly expand and contract. I reference my body's wisdom, slowing down into silence. I spread out into eternity.
Thank you, Seban. Go ahead, Rob.
I'll post it in the chat as I read it. When I realize that I'm in an in-between place, I pause for a moment in appreciation that I'm alive in that in-between place between birth and death.
Thank you.
My name is Catherine. I feel the experience of being in the in-between place that we are all in because of what's happening in the world and in our country. But the in-between place that I am living with has been several years long. It started with an illness that no one could diagnose, ended up with me being close to death and me getting a solid organ transplant, which has changed my life in so many ways. I can't even begin to describe it. So I'm in between the place of who I was and who I will be. And while I'm in that place, when I find myself in an in-between place, I look for messages. I pay attention to my dreams. I write and I create. I feel alone. I burrow. I embrace family. I remember that laughter is good medicine. And I sense life deeply within myself and without myself.
Today is my mom's 83rd birthday, but it is an ordinary day for her. She doesn't know it's her birthday and she doesn't know how old she is. So I am in the in-between in my relationship with my mother. I'm unable to connect with her in the afterlife and unable to connect with her in the alive world. For me, when I find myself in the in-between, spending more time in the quiet, stillness, and I have family in my environment, so sorry for the noise. I create and I dance. And Mary Oliver is a guide for many aspects of life, but paying attention during these ambiguous spaces is grounding and offers some solidity in the ambiguity of transitions. Thank you.
Thank you.
An in-between space for me can often be a time when I ask myself, what is wanting to be expressed in a chapter going forward? And so it can have some melancholy in the stillness, but there's pieces of excitement that kind of come in, thinking that I don't know what it's going to be, but since every chapter of my life has contained something wonderful that I couldn't have predicted, then I have every reason to believe that the future will hold that as well. Even though my life is very full and busy right now, interestingly, my experience as a seminary student feels in betweenish for me, because I've been encouraged from 3 different people to not think I know how I will serve or what I will express on the other side of my seminary experience. So as rich and busy and interesting as it is, it's an in-between place.
So I'll share a little bit more. I'm thinking about, for me, the really hard in between places where I feel just bad. Like, and it may just be like one day, it could be 2 days, where for whatever reason, I'm off. I'm off, and I'm maybe a little depressed, anxious, and I found that if the grace is in a moment, if it can happen, which it usually does, where I remember again to turn toward what it is I'm experiencing rather than resist it. And in that moment, when I finally remember again to do that, I experienced some relief. And then the other thing I will share about it is, because the most recently when this happened, and this may go back to my fundamentalist upbringing, but if I can find the right, the right thought can be very helpful. And most recently, I thought of Valerie Kaur, Kaur, and her the mantra she repeats is breathe and push, breathe and push. And I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to breathe and push. And then other times I'll turn to some Bible verses that have always been really helpful for me. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Darby. Yeah, Diane.
I was surprised at where my reflections went as I was watching the video. I found myself thinking about literal in-between places, like being in the airport or on a plane or on a train going somewhere. And what struck me is that when I'm in one of those places, it's not in between. It's here. It's exactly where I am. And that when I find myself in those places, what I have learned to do, or what I do now, is try to allow myself to be as fully present in that place, whatever it is, wherever it is, as I possibly can. And often what I'll discover in the experience of actual travel is that those places often contain less pressure than any place else, because there's nothing demanded in that moment other than to simply be there. So there can be just a kind of relaxing into presence, if I allow it, in those places. And in the same, in the figurative sense, because I've been in fairly long stretches recently of being in between. And what I find is that if I don't resist not knowing what's coming next, but simply pay attention to where I am and what's happening and what's right in front of me, there's an ease that comes with those intervals, those interim places, that has been unexpected.
Thank you. Maybe I'll speak a little bit about one of my latest sort of experiences with the in-between, where I feel like, and it's again, it's been quite some time, and I'm really feeling like I'm kind of almost, I don't know, reorienting the guiding principles of my life. So the old models don't work anymore. And the new models are not quite in place. And those of you who know me know that I need models. Otherwise, I feel insecure. So I just had this image recently while I was talking to somebody, this image of, I was feeling overwhelmed. Like I have all these things to do and they all feel like bits and pieces. And I had this image of a room full of flip-flops, a room with flip-flops of different colors, different sizes, different shapes, and all in a mound. And I was like, my instinct is I need to organize those flip-flops. They need to be organized by color, by size, by shape. But what's interesting is when I step back from wanting to do that and say, okay, fine. It's uncomfortable to have a room full of flip-flops that you don't know where the other pair is. And I was kind of asking myself today, like, what would the trickster do? That's the Senex move. That's the move of the Saturnian organizing principle that says, okay, we need to line up these shoes in this order. But what would the trickster do? And I had the sense of like the trickster would just dive into the middle of that pile, like it's like fresh snow or autumn leaves or something, and just pick whatever comes in their hand. And how wonderful would it be if I just picked, and in my imagination, if I dive into that pile of flip-flops and pick one, it's a tiny pink flip-flop that'll fit a toddler. And if I just try to make a story out of that particular flip-flop, okay, so there's this toddler who's wearing this pink flip-flop and goes out into the dirt and gets it all dirty and then comes back home tracking dirt. That's the Mary Oliver moment right there. And in my desire to organize them by size and shape and so forth, I so often lose that opportunity to have that story of the toddler with the pink flip-flop on one foot, because I don't know where the other pair is.
Thank you, Sushmita.
I see Josh is unmuted.
I'd like to say how much, when I first heard about what this was going to be about, I added a couple of words to it, which was stuck in between, as opposed to just in between. And I realized that that's a value judgment about in between that sometimes really messes me up. And sometimes I have to look at it and go, no, there's not a judgment attached to it. It's just the reality of the moment. The reality of my moment right now is I have had the COVID vaccine #1, and I haven't had #2. I'm scheduled to have #2 tomorrow. I found having the vaccine #1 an unbelievably liberating and joyous experience, really far beyond all the kind of thank yous I could possibly have. But there's a certain sense that, yes, you do need two. So when you've only had one and you're going to have a second and it's snowing outside, there's a certain amount of anxiety attached to, well, I hope I get #2 tomorrow. But isn't it okay to just be a little anxious? You know, that's it. I'm in between. I don't want to, it's like, I don't want to go, I don't feel stuck in between. I just want to appreciate the in-betweenness. You know, that also the scientists figured out how many days should separate 1 and 2. So clearly they had an idea, if you had Pfizer, whether you had Moderna, exactly what that in-between was going to be like. And the fact that time is about healing. I mean, it isn't like, it's totally non-arbitrary. And it's there to be part of our health regime. So maybe I can celebrate the in between. I don't feel stuck in it. And throughout this, I'm going, do I feel neutral? I'm going, why should I feel neutral? It feels disempowering to feel neutral about it. I don't want to feel neutral about it. I want to go, it's in my power to get myself to that hospital tomorrow and do it. As long as they're there, I'm there, and that's that. So I just wanted to reflect on the fact that in between I brought too much stuff to it. I brought a whole scenario to it. Not to my but certainly not a healing to do it that way. It wasn't in my best interest. I just tossed it in arbitrarily and negatively. So thank you for bringing up the topic. I really like it tonight, and I can report next time about what it's like to be on the other side of the in-between of the COVID vaccinations. Thank you.
If I may burst your bubble, after the second dose, there's still going to be 3 weeks, and then there's going to be mutations. So we can stay in between forever.
I believe life in and of itself is in between. So if I start to think that any of those in-betweens is the end, the gentleman who spoke earlier who talked about, the in-between is between birth and death. And that's only if you believe in birth and death. And if you believe in afterlife, even death isn't it. So, I mean, it's like, it's all in between, which I just want to throw in a sentence that the playwright Tom Stoppard once wrote: every exit's an entrance someplace else. So, I mean, we're never not somewhere.
Yep. Thank you. That was, beautiful. Okay, maybe as people are thinking, I'll share a myth that I love about this in-between place. And it's a gorgeous story. And it's the story of Penelope, who's the wife of Odysseus of the Odyssey. So Odysseus has gone to fight the war at Troy, and then the war is over and everybody else has come home. But as you know, it takes 10 years to reach home. And nobody knows what's happened to him, because everybody left from Troy together. Everybody else has come home, but he hasn't. And his wife, Penelope, who's in Ithaca waiting for him to arrive, is just surrounded by suitors who want to marry her, because it's like, your husband is dead. Don't wait for him. Marry me. I bring you this. Marry me. I bring you that. And she's like, no, I know in my heart that Odysseus is alive, but what do I do? How do I fend off these suitors? So she comes up with this plan. And the plan is, she's a great weaver. She's a famous weaver in the town. So she says her father-in-law, Latreus, is old. So I'm going to weave him a burial shroud. And until the shroud is finished, I'm not going to marry anybody. But once the shroud is finished, then you can come talk to me. So the suitors are kind of calmed a little bit. And she brings her beautiful loom out and she starts weaving this funeral shroud. But she has a trick. What she does is she weaves during the day, and then at night she unravels what she has woven. So every day the shroud is no bigger and the suitors are kept away. And this happens for like 3 years. And eventually somebody tells the people, and there's a whole thing. But by the time the suitors are really ready for her to make a decision, Odysseus comes home. But I love this story because this is what I love about this image of weaving and unweaving is Penelope's work to keep hope alive in this in-between place. Because there's something in her that knows there is hope, even though it feels like there's no evidence that there is hope. So that's a gorgeous little story about the in-between place. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Erin.
I just want to speak thank yous into the room. Everyone, it was so rich to hear everyone's share. I would just say that I think it was Karen who said something about keeping that idea of that knowing what's next is going to be exciting and wonderful, because it always is. And I really hold this space right now, especially after this conversation, with a true excited expectation, you know, knowing that that is the truth and knowing that that will come to be. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm just, as I'm listening to everybody, I'm reflecting that it takes a lot of courage to hang out in the in-between. Like you said in the beginning, it's not that exciting, although it can be. And it takes a lot of, I don't know, I experience our culture as very, like directed, and I experience a fair amount of internal pressure to decide and to be and to shine and to, you know, so hanging out in the in-between, I'm really there right now professionally, and I just keep like trying to like, that's why I wrote about carving out the space, you know, just doing my best to like push out those external and internal pressures and just be. And yeah, it takes courage.
Yeah.
It's not super supported.
No. No. Write down your goals and accomplish the first 10 things on your to-do list.
Along those lines, there's something for me too about coming together in community to talk about in between space that feels really good, to honor it. And it feels like when I leave here, I'm going to remember that, you know, that we have community around in between space, and that just, it makes a difference. So thank you, Sushmita.
Thank you. We have 4 more minutes. The bar is going to close. Anybody else? If not, we can start popcorning our little words or phrases of like, what's the harvest of this evening? What are we bringing home from this harvest? You can just unmute and speak, or yeah, that's probably the best.
Be here now and discovery.
Wonderful.
Appreciate the in-between.
Dance.
Honor the in-between space.
Hold grief and
positive expectation at the same time.
Being alive is being enough.
Anything else for our harvest basket? So we can make our stew.
The word present means both a gift and this moment in time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Community. The community is alive in the in-between.
Community and commune, to commune.
Make friends with in between. Maybe ask it to chat, maybe ask it to sing along, or maybe even ask it to dance.
Dance with the trickster. And be watchful about the tricks. May trip you up.
To cats, there is no in between. There's just this moment.
Yes. Yeah, we can learn so much from our animal companions. Anything else from you, Darby? Or should we call it an evening?
We can. I could chime us out if you would like.
Okay. Before that, I'll just say one thing, which is that we have been companions together. And companion is calm, which is together, and pan, which is bread. So we have made a harvest. So now we can, exactly. We can be nourished by this harvest.
And I like the way the chime holds the energy of the discussion. And in this case, tonight holds the energy of blessing in the in-between space.
Thank you, everybody.